what's up everyone? Shady Bunny here, coming at you with a draft analysis. It's something that I think most people can benefit from if you're still learning the arena, but also for expert players. I chose a draft here of a 12-1 rogue run, where some decisions were a bit controversial, and I'm not even going to say that one decision might have been better than the other, but it made the deck fit really nicely together. It also is a good example of how I like to play my rogue decks. So I'd say let's jump right in and I'll talk you guys through the cards and why I picked every single one of them. Alright. Poof. Alright, over here now. Alright, I'm just going to start the recording here. This was actually a run that I coached. I was together with Kevin, someone who moderates my channel. So here we go. Pick one. Yeah, so Twilight Drake is not a great rare, but Mana Wraith and the Little Exorcist are always going to be subpar, and Twilight Drake at least sometimes will be a big body. So for me it's a fairly easy Twilight Drake here, even though it has some obvious weaknesses. You don't want it to get silenced, you obviously don't want to top deck it. This pick's fairly easy. Zombie Chow is the best one drop in the game right now, at least neutral wise. Let me just pause over here for a second. Yeah, I mean, a Zombie Chow on turn 1 essentially means that you've played a 2-drop for 1 mana, and being able to do that as player 1 essentially means that the opponent somewhat loses his jump that he can get on you with the coin, because generally we'll see someone who has 2-2-drops in hand with a coin go coin 2-drop into 2-drop, and Zombie Chow essentially means that you no longer have the initiative if you do that. So yeah, great card, especially as player 1. The next pick here for me is once again fairly easy. Goblin Autobarber, in my opinion, is basically the best rogue common. It's super strong because it not only fixes your curve early where you need 2 drops, but it also fixes the position of early removal. It's half a deadly poison. It's comparable to a backstab sometimes. Ooh, let me just go here, but I figure we're gonna go a little bit slower here. Alright, so this pack's a bit interesting because I think a lot of, especially newer players, who, maybe players who come from Constructed into the arena will look at this pack and be like, oh, this is an easy Tinker Sharpsword oil, that thing is amazing. And I completely disagree here. Amani Berserker is a super solid 2-drop that can sometimes just win you the early game. Let's say you play an Amani Berserker and your opponent has to play a Loot Hoarder. You just kill that Loot Hoarder, get a 5-1 body, and then, if the opponent is a mage, he'll have to use his hero power on turn 3 rather than playing a Spider Tank. That's a huge tempo lead. So I think Amani Berserker has a great advantage in that way. It's also just really good to play into a Consecration or Holy Nova turn, where you know that they kind of want to use the AoE, but the Amani really discourages it. 1 second. I'm gonna make sure we stay hydrated if we're gonna be talking this much. Now, oil is a great card, and I like to have 1 oil, but I don't need 1 oil. So I'll pick it up later in the game when my deck is nicely fleshed out. Or, maybe if I have a charge minion like an Arcane Golem, it can make for a great turn 7 where you go Arcane Golem into oil, the charge lands onto the Golem, 7 damage charge minion guaranteed. Pretty solid then, but this early in the draft, we'll go for the very premium 2-drop, in my opinion. The Amani Berserker, really strong. Okie dokie. Alright, let's go to the next pick here. Okay, so this is, I'm just gonna pause every time I have a pick, it's a lot easier. This one's also fairly straightforward. Razorfen Hunter is a mediocre 3-drop, whereas Tiger, once again in my opinion, is towards the top end of quality in 5-drops. This because it has stealth, which is really good to deny counterplay. You can play Tiger into a Flame Strike turn. Your opponent will be able to Flame Strike it, but not ping it, because it'll be a 5-1 stealth. So even the dreaded, turn 9 Flame Strike, hitting a Flame Strike ping for 5 damage, Tiger survives that. Also, you can put it down, and they can't hex it, they can't fireball it straight away. So this guy is almost always going to get a little bit of value back. Whereas, your regular 5-drop of, say, a Spiteful Smith might just get wrecked by a fireball immediately. Okay, this pick is also fairly straightforward. Piloted Shredder right now is, you know, one of the, if not the best neutral 4-drop in the game. I think only rivaled right now by Dark Iron Dwarf, a card that I really appreciate. But yeah, I mean, not much competition. Anti-Killbot can be cute in Rogue, but I generally don't value it too highly because I think that playing the 3/3 body on turn 5 just costs you too much tempo. So yeah, and then Darksteel Leader, of course, also a mediocre card right now. Pilot Shredder, top tier. Okay. This pick is actually... I'm not going to say that it's super difficult, because Eviscerate is top tier, but I've explained why Amani is so good. Amani Berserker is really, really good, and we have 2/2-drops right now. I like to have my 2-drops sorted out early on so I can pick removal later on, but you know, if it's paired with premium removal here, we'll still pick the Eviscerate. It's just that it's so flexible. You know, turn 4 you can play a 2-drop, Eviscerate something for 4, really strong. Okay, next pack, once again fairly straightforward, 2 subpar spells and then Pilot Shredder, super top tier 4. Okay, next up, this one's actually also maybe a little bit up for debate. I think a lot of people like Shiv a little bit too much in Rogue. I don't think Shiv is unplayable, but it's a card that I only pick up once, you know, the other 2 cards I'd rather not have in my deck, right? So what Shiv is for me is, you know, it's a cycle card, which means you're, you know, quote-unquote playing with 29 cards in your deck because it's just going to replace itself. Because let's be honest, Shiv essentially is a hero power, but you don't get to keep the second half of the dagger. You pay 2 mana to deal 1 damage. If I hero power, I pay 2 mana to deal the damage, and I get to deal another damage next turn. So tempo-wise, a hero power is better. Now, agreed, sometimes the Shiv, you know, you'll be able to Shiv the shield off a Force Tank Max and not take 7 damage, which is, you know, obviously an advantage. Especially in the early game, Shiv is really, you know, just too slow. But we'll pick it up, let's say, if it was paired with a Tauren Warrior and a Wisp. You know, then you pick the Shiv. Because, you know, it can give you that utility of removing the Divine Shield of a Force Tank Max and cycle through your deck, not having to play with a Wisp or a Tauren Warrior. But Raging Worgen is a pretty fun card. You know, we might also pick up some Enragers. It's pretty... some Enrage activators, like Perdition's Blade perhaps. Okay, this pick for me is also fairly straightforward. We don't have any activators for the Rubian Egg. Secret Keeper is subpar, and Young Priestess is very, very good, in my opinion. A lot of people dislike her because of the 2-in-1 body. They say, but if you play her, you know, your opponent will just use the mage hero power. Because let's face it, most of our arena opponents are mages. So it's, you see that a lot of my consideration when building a deck also goes out to how am I going to beat a mage? Do I have enough things that survive Flame Strike? But Young Priestess here, you know, follows a different philosophy where if you put it down on turn 1 and your opponent has to use his coin and then use the hero power, you've kind of done the same as the Zombie Chow. It's not completely the same, right? Because your card will still die for free, you know, you are a card behind, but your 2-drop will now have the initiative on his 2-drop because, you know, your opponent had to coin that early. So she is essentially a sacrificial pawn turn 1 versus a mage where you get the tempo lead, and later in the game it's one of those 1-drops that immediately does something. The turn she's played, you know, if you end the turn, she'll give something plus HP, could help to play around the Flame Strike, and against the non-pink class, this thing could get quite out of control. If you are able to buff up, say, an Amani Berserker to a 2 and 4, you know, that makes it a lot easier for the Amani to survive trades and, you know, get really strong. So for me, I really like Young Priestess, especially in Warlock, where, you know, the card loss doesn't matter too much because you have that hero power. But we're Rogue, and I still like Young Priestess quite a bit. Alright. On to the next pick here. Suppose I was still giving an explanation here about why we pick Young Priestess. Okay. This is... I think it's a fairly easy pick at the moment. I don't... Ooh, sorry. Let me just wait until I'm not hovering over a card here. Force Tank Max is essentially just a bomb. What do we mean with that is when you top deck it, it's going to be so good. Like, let's say we're both, you know, your opponent and you are both on 10 mana, and you're living off the top of your deck. If you draw a Force Tank Max and he draws, say, an Elven Archer, you're gonna be in a pretty good spot. You'll have a 7/7 without Divine Shield, because you'll use the Divine Archer. You'll use the Elven Archer, but you know what I mean here. It's a really solid late game card, of which I like to have one when I'm playing an aggressive deck. I like to have one because, you know, not every game is going to be decided in the first 7 or 8 turns. Sometimes you will take your opponent to the late game, and then having one of these cards is really good. So I like to have one Force Tank Max, or a Stormwind Champion, or, you know, various other cards that are really good in the late game, say an Alexstrasza if you get lucky. Oh, this pick is pretty interesting. I think a lot of people are still in the, you know, see Yeti, pick Yeti mentality. I think here that would be incorrect. Cultmaster is really good to keep you going. Right now we don't have any source of card draw, and Cultmaster, in my opinion, is the best source of card draw out there right now, in the arena, that is. I think she's more flexible than a Sprint, you know, 4 mana rather than 7 mana. I'm still a huge fan of a Sprint in a very low cost deck, but Cultmaster, you know, you can potentially even get more cards out of her than a Sprint. She's a threat on the board herself, etc, etc. It's just lots of arguments that speak in Cultmaster's favor, especially in a rogue where you're gonna have cheap cards like Backstab. You're gonna run out of steam typically slightly faster than your opponent, and then having a Cultmaster to immediately recover that card advantage is amazing. Okay, here Goblin Autobarber, as I said, the best rogue common in my opinion, so it's not a very difficult pick. You know, for the arguments that we said earlier, it affects both your curve, where you'll have more 2-drops. We're always going to look for 6 2-drops, 6 to 7 2-drops in your draft, so having those while being able to affect the board early is what makes the Barber amazing for me. He fixes 2 roles at the same time, early board control and working on your curve. So very good. I'll include my preferred mana curve in the at the end of the video, or in the comments section. I'll make sure you guys can read it on, like, how many 2-drops I want, how many 3-drops I want, etc. Okay. Next up we have Annibar Ambusher versus Frost Elemental. I don't think Unstable Ghoul is in the running here. Well, you see that we picked the Frost Elemental. For me that's a fairly straightforward pick. We didn't have a 6-drop yet, we already had 2 Piloted Treaders and Twilight Drake, and Annibar Ambusher does have that, you know, negative effect that if you play it and your opponent fireballs it, and say you have a Strangletorn Tiger next to it, your opponent's going to use 4 mana to remove your Annibar Ambusher and remove your Strangletorn Tiger off the board as well, essentially giving him a Fireball plus a Sap. I don't hate playing Annibar Ambusher, but it definitely has some restraints. You can't play it next to a Strangletorn Tiger, essentially, that's what I'm saying. You have to play cheap creatures next to it in order for the Death Rattle to not be disastrous. Okay, so this pick is once again pretty interesting. You've heard me say that Goblin Autobarber is the best rogue common, and here we have 2 other very good rogue commons right next to it. I'm still going to pick the Barber here because I'm a huge fan of the card. I'll be explaining the games as well. I'll be uploading those as well, so you guys can see how I use that Goblin Autobarber and why, in my opinion, it is so damn good in the game as well. Now, Assassinate is the second priority here. Even though Deadly Poison is super good in the early game, we already have 2 Autobarbers and we don't have any hard removal yet. So Assassinate wouldn't be a terrible pick here, because I like to have preferably 2 hard removals, but I need 1, right? You need to have 1 hard removal card to just say, hey, my opponent played an Ironbark Protector, now I'm gonna assassinate it. If you don't have a card like that versus an Ironbark Protector, or say a Force Tank, or even worse, an Ancient of War, that's 10 health you actually have to punch through, that's way too much. So having 1 Assassinate and a Sabotage, or an Assassinate and a Sap to remove it off the board are, you know, I really like to have those. But here I'm gonna go and take a small risk and still pick the Barber, simply because the Barber has such high quality, and I'm basically saying, okay, I assume that I'm gonna be offered either a Sap or an Assassinate, or perhaps even a Sabotage in the Epic pack. So go ahead and skip here. To the next pick. There we go. Barber. Oops. Looks like we skipped over a couple picks. My apologies. It's getting a bit messy. Alright, cool. Next pack. Defias Ringleader, Cultmaster, Mogushan, Warden. This would be an easy Cultmaster if we didn't have her already. Now it's an easy Defias Ringleader, because Cultmaster is good, but you never want to have two of her in the hand. She's a bit too clunky. You also have 2 1-drops to activate the Ringleader, so fairly easy Ringleader there. Okay, this one, once again, there can be a little bit of debate, because Boulder Fist Ogre is a great 6-drop, but we already have a 6-drop. Generally, I'm looking for 2 6-drops and a bomb. So 2 6-drops and a Force Tank. So I already have a Frost Elemental, and I mentioned that Dark Iron Dwarf for me right now is the only 4-drop that, you know, rivals the Shredder for the #1 neutral 4-drop position. It also synergizes really nicely with Defias Ringleader, you know, getting extra tokens out. Even with Auto Barber, you know, having a 3/2 body, if you buff that for 2, 5 damage is generally what you're going to want going into your opponent's turn 4. It kills Senjins, it kills Yetis, etc. So we'll go with the Dwarf here, because, you know, once again, we can still get another one, get another 6-drop. Alright, this one for me is also fairly easy. We were a little bit greedy earlier when we drafted that Barber over the Assassinate, and now we are offered a Sabotage. Sabotage, you know, hard removal, just destroys the minion, no real condition, you know, we don't need to deal damage, you don't have to combo it, you could, you know, if your opponent has a True Silver, you know, make it extra juicy. But yeah, as I said, we need hard removal. And you know, a lot of people might say, yeah, but it's random. You know, being a rogue, we can usually affect the board that we're able to clear all the other things, so the Sabotage just kills it. What makes Sabotage also pretty good is that it can kill a Spectral Knight or a Stranglethorn Tiger as well when it's still in stealth, because of the random factor. So usually the random factor is actually an advantage. You know, being able to kill an untargetable creature or a stealth creature. Just imagine a Ravenhold Assassin being there. You know, you have 5 health left, Ravenhold Assassin on the board, poof, and just sabotage it away. Can't do that with an Assassinate or a Sap. Okay, next pack is pretty straightforward for me. I really don't like Cobalt Geomancer or Undertaker, and I like Reckless Rocketeer, especially in a more aggressive deck like a Rogue. It allows us to close out the game a bit faster than you normally would, and in a, you know, emergency situation, the Reckless Rocketeer can still take down, you know, your opponent's 5-drop or 6-drop. It also synergizes nicely with Cultmaster, where we can defend our Cultmaster, sacrificing the Reckless Rocketeer, drawing a card at the same time. So charge minions do become quite a bit better if you have a Cultmaster. And yeah, she's really not up against anything special here. Playing a 2/2 on turn 2 is usually just gonna get you behind if your opponent has a Chugga Chugga or something. You know, a 2/3 will just make short work of that. Alright, next up, once again fairly straightforward. We have a premium 2-drop here, the Knife Juggler. Really good card, Master of Disguise. I like her more than most other people, but she's no competition for the Knife Juggler. Just super solid. Okay, here, once again, fairly straightforward pick for me. I've just explained why I don't like Cobalt Geomancer. Nearbar Weblore, also not that good, especially when we have 3 Goblin Auto Barbers and various other battle cries. For me, it's an easy Dragon Link mechanic. Not the greatest card, but you know, we can buff the 2-in-1 body with the Dark Iron Dwarf or make other use of it. Okie dokie. This one's pretty interesting because you have one of the best 2-drops versus, you know, one of the best rogue cards. Because we don't have a Backstab or a Deadly Poison yet, we do have 3 Goblin Auto Barbers, which is amazing for early board control. but still, backstab, sometimes it feels like you're cheating when you're playing a backstab. You know, if your opponent plays a knife juggler, and then we just play our knife juggler and then backstab his, we've just made the same, we invested the same amount of mana, but we played a minion and killed his minion. So backstab in the early game can really be a bit overpowered. Now, obviously there's a trade-off that later in the game, it's kind of a low value card, because having one card deal 2 damage to an undamaged minion, I mean, it's like an arcane shot with a limitation. And arcane shots, you know, we all know that's not great for value, but of course it's worth it. You know, it's super good in the early game. That's why we draft it. You look for the backstab in the mulligan phase, and when you find it, you're probably gonna get control of that board. Super good card to backstab. Alright, I think this pick is also pretty interesting, because if this is your first pack, I think you're just going to go towards the Stormwind Champion, because the Stormwind Champion is super strong. If you have 2 or 3 creatures on the board, the Stormwind Champion is effectively representing a 9/9 for 7. You know, you're getting +1/+1 for every creature. So if you have 3 creatures on the board, you know, super crazy. Also, the fact that the minions that are getting buffed can attack immediately is that part of the stat distribution is used immediately. So, you know, it's like half of the body has charge sometimes, which is a weird way of explaining it, but I hope that the message comes through, that the Stormwind Champion affects the board immediately. You know, and the minions that get buffed can immediately attack with it. Unless, of course, you've played the minion in the same turn, but if you're going to be spending 7 mana, probably not going to be playing many more minions after that. But if you look at our curve, we have 1 Raging Worgen for turn 3. That is just not enough. We're gonna need more stuff on the board to make sure that we make it to the end game. We've also already picked up a bomb, you know, we've picked up the Force Tank Max, we have the Frost Elemental and the Reckless Rocketeer for our end game, so right now I'm really not that worried about our end game. I'm much more worried about our early game. So for me, the Scarlet Crusader is a card that we need to draft. It's not something that we really want to. We kind of want the Stormwind Champion, but we need the Crusader to make sure that we stay on the board. Because I don't care how many big cards you have in your hand. If your opponent, you know, contests the board, you're probably not going to be able to do anything. Okay, this one is pretty tough. All of these cards are pickable right now. We have 2 3-drops now because of the Scarlet Crusader, so Raging Worgen might, you know, definitely come to your attention, seeing as you look at the curve here. We have a lot of 2-drops, a lot of 4-drops, almost no 3-drops, so I think a lot of people would normally gravitate towards the Worgen here. However, I think that Worgen's like a subpar turn 3 these days, where, you know, you have Spider Tank being a 3/4, you have Ogre Brute being a 4/4, you know, stuff like Dark Cultist, you know, like Raging Worgen usually doesn't do great versus your opponent's turn 3. I mean, it does amazing if your opponent's greedy and plays an Acolyte of Pain, but that's not always the case, is it now? So then you have the Backstab number 2 versus Amani Berserker. If you look at our 2-drops right now, we have 1, 4, 5, 6 if we count the Defias. I usually count Defias as half a 2-drop because it's only really a 2-drop if you have a coin, and then technically he's a 1-drop then. Because you obviously don't want to play the vanilla 2/2 body, you want to get that battle cry, I mean the combo. So I'm gonna go with the Backstab here because we only have 1. I think the second Backstab is really good. The third Backstab has to be up against some below average cards. If this was the third Backstab, I would definitely pick Amani Berserker for the reasons explained earlier. I think it's a great 2-drop, super strong, you know, allows you to sometimes just win the game if your opponent plays a weak minion early on. It's also great to play into AoE, you know, Consecrations and Holy Novas, what have you, into a Dread Infernal turn, you know, like turn 6 against a Warlock. They're usually going to want to play a Dread Infernal, you know, you put that Amani down, so like, hey, if you play your Dread Infernal, I'll have a 5 and 2 here, and I can just use my Amani and my dagger to kill your 6-drop. So there's a lot of use for Amani Berserker that a lot of people just don't pay attention to. But even with that card being so good, I still choose for the backstab, for that factor that we explained earlier. Sometimes it feels like cheating if you have a backstab early on. Okay, here, fairly straightforward pick for me. We have okay amounts of 2-drops, as we just pointed out. I thought we were at 5.5 here. Yeah, so we're at 5.5 2-drops. I want to have 6. If I'm stuck at 5.5, I won't think it's that bad, because I have 3 Goblin Auto Barbers. Using a dagger on turn 2 really won't hurt us that much. So I don't feel pressure towards a Fairy Dragon. And Spectral Knight is great at beating mages. It's also something we mentioned at the start of the draft. A lot of my deck composition goes out towards how do I beat mage. Mage and paladin, those are the 2 most common classes, so it only makes sense that you try to make your deck that it does well against those classes. The backstabs perform amazing against paladin because you can just dagger the shield of a shielded minibot and then just backstab the minibot. The Spectral Knight does great against mage. They can't flame strike it. Well, I mean, they can flame strike it, but it won't die. It's a 4 and 6. They can't target it with spells, so no fireball, no frostbolt. And the best of all is they can't ping it. So usually the mage will, you know, flame strike your high health minions and then the turn after or afterwards just ping it with their hero power. Spectral Knight prevents that. So great body to beat mages with, and obviously not a bad card against the other classes. Everybody has some kind of spell they want to target the Spectral Knight with. So one of the better 5-drops right now. There we go. Fairly certain this was not a very difficult decision at the time, so there we go. Okay, so going from a top tier card to a not so top tier pack. Nightblade, really not that good. You pay 5 mana for a 4/4, which is just, let's call it crap, you know. Most 4-drops have better stats than this, so you're paying 1 extra mana to have a worse 4-drop. And the Battle Cry of dealing 3 phase damage is generally not worth it. You have the Bear here, which is a 3 mana 3/3, about, you know, the same power level as a Worgen. I'd say slightly less because I'd rather have the Worgen effect than the Taunt. Nonetheless, still not a great 3-drop. And then you have Betrayal. I'm going to choose for the Betrayal here because we only have a Sabotage as hard removal, and Betrayal, I'm not going to say that it always acts as hard removal, but I've definitely, you know, won several games just because of having a Betrayal. It punishes your opponent if they don't play around it. Let's say if they play 3 minions and the middle one is not a stealther or an untargetable, just target the middle minion, deal a bunch of damage. That's generally always going to be worth it. And even if you have 2 minions next to each other, as long as they're big guys, you can have one big guy killing the other big guy. That feels like an Assassinate. So I'd rather have Assassinate than Betrayal, but I don't mind having 1 Betrayal in my deck. I've had it work great for me in the past. Okay, this one's really easy. We need 3-drops. Spider Tank is an amazing 3-drop. There we go. Okay, once again, we need 3-drops. Scarlet Crusader is an amazing 3-drop. And we already picked up the Betrayal and the Sabotage, so I don't feel too pressured towards the Seb. So I'll pick the Scarlet Crusader here. This is a draft really coming through for us. We're going to be slightly low on 3-drops, which wasn't going to be problematic, because playing a Dagger on turn 2 and playing a Barber on turn 3 really isn't that bad. But it really gave us that top quality deck, which is also why the deck went 12-1. This was really a top tier deck, but I mean, even without those 3-drops, I'm confident the deck would have been infinite level, because the other cards were pretty solid, and you know, we definitely had a plan going into it. We knew how to beat paladins, we knew how to beat mages. It's usually all you need to go infinite. Okay, so this is one of the picks I'm a bit more excited about. You've seen that this is like the 4th or the 5th Amani Berserker that we've been offered, and yet I'm gonna decline it again. Now this might seem like, whoa, so you keep saying how good Amani is and you keep not picking it. It's because of the synergy of the deck, alright, how the deck is going to work out. I see that we have a Dark Iron Dwarf. I see that we have a Cult Master. Those 2 really work well with Defias Ringleader. You know, having multiple bodies on the board gives you more freedom to buff something up with a Dark Iron Dwarf, or to sacrifice the body for an extra card with the Cult Master. I also see that we have 2 backstabs. 2 backstabs are great for Defias Ringleader. turn 2, even without a coin, we can backstab our opponent's creature and then, you know, get the Defias Ringleader out there with his little scrub to join. You're developing 4 power and 3 toughness on turn 2, which is also just really, really strong. Now, Shadowed Sun Cleric is the card I think most players would have picked here, because you could use another 3-drop and it's pretty great in general, just to let your Amani Berserker kill his Amani Berserker and survive. I just had a feeling that going into this draft, having those 2 backstabs, having the cards that we mentioned earlier, the Dwarf and the Cultmaster, the Defias Ringleader was gonna pack that slightly bigger punch. I believe at this point I even asked for the chat's opinion, because this was a tough pick for me. It was a really tough pick. But I went with my gut decision in the end. We picked up the Ringleader, and as you will see in the games to follow after the draft analysis, I will also analyze the games. You'll see how those 2 Defias Ringleaders in combination with the 2 backstabs really allow for a powerful combination. So I'm going to skip slightly ahead here. I think we're close to picking it. Let's see, this was taken straight from the stream, so you'll see the overlay and the follower alert. 1 second, please. That's the thing though, I draft fairly slow, so sometimes you're gonna have to wait a little bit. Still thinking. This is slow even for my standards. Alright. Next one. Okay, great. So this is the 30th pick, so the last card going into this card, this pack is a great pack. Lots of quality in here. I think most people that come from constructed here would slam the Blade Flurry. But on second thought, if you look at our deck, we actually don't have a Poison or a Tinker. So when people look at the deck, they'll be like, okay, Blade Flurry probably not great. I mean, if the other 2 rares would have been subpar, I would have still picked Blade Flurry, because we have 3 Goblin Auto Barbers, which are still pretty good in combination with the Blade Flurry. But, you know, we have 2 premium 5-drops next to the Blade Flurry, so we're gonna forget all about the Blade Flurry, move on straight to the 5-drops. We see the Bomb Lobber and the Ogre Ninja. Once again, I think a lot of people would slam the Bomb Lobber when you compare these 2 cards, because the Bomb Lobber is a great card in the arena. You're never gonna hear me say that Bomb Lobber isn't great. I love a Bomb Lobber. But in this particular deck, I feel like the Ogre Ninja suits us slightly better. And this was also heavily contested in the chat. Everyone was saying like, no, pick Bomb Lobber, Ogre Ninja's not so good. But let's look at the stats. You're paying 5 mana for a 6/6 stealth. I mean, we spoke about Stranglethorn Tiger being great. This guy just has an extra toughness and an extra an extra toughness and extra damage. Now, of course, there is the trade-off that sometimes Ogre will do what he wants, which is sometimes not what we want. But being a rogue, I think it's fairly easy to clear the board and, you know, have the ninja say like, okay, ninja, if you kill his minion, that's fine. If you go face, I'll use my Eviscerate on his minion. It's really not that bad. I just like the ninja so much because it has 6 health, which is once again great versus mages. Bomb Lobber, if I play that, I'm not really building a Consecrate proof board. Whereas if I play Ogre Ninja, my board is becoming a lot better against, Flame Strike proof board. So if I play Ogre Ninja, my board is going to be a lot better versus Flame Strike. I feel that we have plenty of removal right now. We have 2 backstabs, 3 Goblin Auto Barbers, an Eviscerate. We even have Dark Iron Dwarf to help trade up. We've got a Sabotage, we've got a Betrayal. So for me, there's enough removal, and just in general I feel like we're gonna have enough board control that I can trade in my weak minions going in towards the Flame Strike turn, rather than using the Bomb Lobber's effect, saving some more of those weak minions just to have them die a turn or 2 later versus the Flame Strike. So I don't think that people that pick Bomb Lobber are necessarily wrong here. I feel like against a mage, the Ogre Ninja will be better. And as I've said a couple times throughout the draft, drafting your deck unfortunately means that you're gonna have to make it decent against mages. Because let's face it, Most people will pick Mage when it's available in the class selection. But we can use that to our advantage, you know? If you have some knowledge about what the statistically most likely class is for you to face, you can tweak your deck in a fashion that it will benefit from that information. Hence the Ogre Ninja pick here. Okie dokie. Alright guys, that's gonna be the end of the draft here. I think once again this was a pretty difficult decision. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. Okay, so I will go over the preferred curve and then see how closely this deck matches up with that. Let me just quickly open up a notepad here so we can talk over that. There we go. Whoop. So, curve-wise, it's a bit improvised here. It's the first time we're making this video. In the future, when I do more of these videos, I'm sure it'll be a little bit more streamlined. But hey, we're going for the essence here, which is the solid draft advice that I think I can give you guys. So we're going to have 2 drops. I like to have 6 to 7. Then we have 3 drops. That's going to be 4 to 5 3 drops. 4 drops, that is the same. I like to have 4 to 5. Then 5 drops. I like to have 2 to 4 5 drops. Then 6 drops. This is the template for a rogue, by the way. It doesn't vary very much from other classes, but you know, some classes say a druid wants to be a bit heavier, a hunter wants to be a bit lighter, etc., etc. 2 drops, and then you know, 7 plus drops. I like to have 1. So this is my ideal minion distribution. Now, if we look at our deck, how closely does our deck match that description? Because it's not that I draft with this, you know, right next to me, but I do have it in mind. Like, what am I looking for? You've seen me count my 2 drops sometimes when we're making the deck. So I don't speak about 1 drops here because having a 1 drop is great. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but if you can pick up a Zombie Chow or a Worgen Infiltrator, you can do it. So how are we gonna translate that the best here? I guess if you're gonna go in 1 drops, you'd say when playing a rogue, I'd say 1 to 3, but only top tier. So we're talking about the Young Priestess, the Zombie Chow, Worgen Infiltrator, not really talking about stuff like a Leper Gnome, although, you know, if it's Leper Gnome up against a Shield Bearer and a Conceal, then we're probably still gonna pick Leper Gnome. But those are exceptions, of course. Okie dokie. We have a Zombie Chow and Young Priestess. So for this deck's intents and purposes, we have, just put it over here, a rogue deck. We have 2. Okay, check. That's pretty good. 2 drops. We have 1, 2. Well, I said that the Defias Ringleader counts for a half, so we'll see. We have 1, 4, 5. So we have 5 regular 2 drops plus 2 Defias Ringleaders. I'm gonna count that as 6 2 drops, so 6/7. That's pretty good. We wanted 6 or 7. It's really nice. 3 drops. We have a Raging Worgen, 2 Scarlet Crusaders, and a Spider Tank. That's 4. Also, check. Nice. 4 drops. Cultmaster, not really a 4 drop. We're going to want cards that we can play on the turn themselves. So even though Cultmaster costs 4 mana, it's not really a 4 drop. So we have a Dragonling Mechanic, 2 Piloted Treaders, that's 3, a Twilight Drake, that's 4, and a Dwarf, that's 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 4 drops. That's also perfectly in the range. So as we see, this deck is checking out really nicely with my my mental checklist of which cards do I want to get a really consistent deck because consistency is key in the arena. Even if your cards are high quality, if you just have way too many big cards and, you know, too few small cards, or vice versa, if you just have way too many early cards, like 13 2-drops, 7 3-drops, and then like 1 5-drop, 1 6-drop, the deck is also not really great in balance, because, you know, when your opponent's playing a 5-drop, you'll have to play 2 2-drops, which is obviously less desirable. Anyways, let's move on here. 5-drops, 1 2 3, that's also perfectly in the range. I want 2 to 4, and we have 3 here. Now 6-drops, 2 6-drops, amazing, there we go, and we have 1 bomb, so 7 plus drops, 1 bomb. So if we look at this, this deck is like the perfect example of a draft coming together. Now, will you have this every time? No. But do you have a higher chance of getting this when you have a mental checklist of what you're looking for? Damn right. So you can even make this yourself, where you have this, you know, let's say next to you on a piece of paper on your monitor. Just you can copy this and then try to make the same list. I will be doing a analysis for every class that I play, which I think that this will be the last one in Goblins vs Gnomes, because the Grand Tournament is coming out soon, which is really nice. Then I can gain some experience in the Grand Tournament and then help you guys with how the deck should be constructed then, because it might be that these values will change a little bit here and there, depending on if the game gets a little bit faster or slows down a bit. Either way, that's good. Alright guys, that's it for the first video. I will be uploading the analysis of the games as well, so you can see how we use the cards that we drafted, you know, in which situation which card is good. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.